June 14th, 1943. Somewhere between Lyon and Grenoble, occupied France. The railroad cut through the Vercors foothills in a series of exposed curves, vulnerable terrain where steel rails gleamed like silver ribbons across green hillsides. At exactly 14 minutes past 9 in the morning, Jasper Moreau stands at the edge of the tree line, watching smoke rise from a cooking fire 200 meters away, where French railway workers prepare their midday meal early. The smoke drifts lazily eastward, caught by valley winds, dispersing into nothing within seconds. Jasper stares at that smoke with the intensity of a man solving an equation that might save 800 lives. He is 41 years old, a stage magician by trade, and he is about to prove that the principles of theatrical illusion can hide a 250-meter freight train from German reconnaissance aircraft, using nothing but chemicals, mirrors, and an understanding of atmospheric optics that nobody in the French resistance seems to comprehend. Behind him, concealed in a tunnel cut through limestone cliffs, sits Train 67, 42 freight cars carrying 12 tons of medical supplies, 23 tons of ammunition, 16 disassembled anti-aircraft guns, and enough radio equipment to outfit 30 resistance cells across southern France. The cargo represents 6 months of careful accumulation, smuggled from caches across Vichy, France, consolidated into one massive shipment that must reach the Maquis stronghold in the Vercors Mountains before nightfall. The problem is fundamental and apparently unsolvable. The rail line between Lyon and Grenoble crosses 18 kilometers of open terrain. No tunnels, no tree cover, just exposed track cutting across farmland and hillsides. German reconnaissance flights patrol this route every 4 hours. Luftwaffe, Foothills Storch. Observation aircraft. Slow-moving, high-wing monoplanes that can loiter at 3,000 meters, scanning the ground with binoculars and cameras. They spot everything. A truck on a country road. Livestock gathered suspiciously in a field. Certainly a 250-meter freight train moving at 40 kilometers per hour across open ground. The resistance has tried moving trains through this section exactly 4 times since January. 3 were spotted by Luftwaffe reconnaissance. German fighters strafed 2 of them into burning wreckage. The third was bombed so thoroughly that recovery crews found pieces of freight cars scattered across 3 hectares. The 4th train, carrying only coal and therefore strategically worthless, made it through only because German pilots apparently decided it wasn't worth the ammunition. Train 67 cannot be worthless. Its cargo is desperately needed. The Maquis fighters in the Vercors are preparing for sustained operations against German occupation forces. They need those anti-aircraft guns, that ammunition, those medical supplies. Without them, planned operations will fail. Men will die unnecessarily. The entire resistance network in southeastern France will be compromised. Colonel Maurice Petit, resistance commander for the Lyon region, made the situation clear during this morning's briefing in the tunnels beneath a wine warehouse. We cannot move this train during daylight. It will be spotted and destroyed. We cannot move it at night. The engineers refuse to run a fully loaded train through mountain curves in darkness. Derailment probability is too high. We cannot disassemble the cargo and truck it. We have neither enough trucks nor enough time. We cannot wait for better conditions. German intelligence knows we are moving something significant. They have increased patrol frequency. Every day we wait increases the probability of discovery. Therefore, Petit concluded, we are not moving the train. It sits in the tunnel until we can arrange a suicidal daylight run, or until the Germans locate it and bomb the tunnel entrance. Either way, 8 months of work is wasted. That is when Jasper Moreau, theatrical magician and illusion designer, currently serving the resistance as a forger of identity documents, spoke up from the back of the room. What if we move it during daylight but make it invisible? The silence that followed was profound. Someone laughed nervously. Petit stared at Jasper with the expression of a serious man losing patience with nonsense. Invisible, Petit repeated flatly. Explain quickly or stop wasting our time. Jasper moved to the map table. The Germans spot trains because of visual contrast. Dark locomotive, dark freight cars against light-colored ground. Shadow, movement, smoke from the engine. All of these create detection signatures visible from 3,000 meters. But what if we eliminate the contrast? What if we create conditions where visual detection becomes impossible? Camouflage has been tried, Petit said. Paint does not work against aerial observation. The shape of a train is too distinctive. Not camouflage, Jasper replied. Obscuration. What if we hide the train inside a fog bank? There is no fog in June. Not natural fog. Artificial fog. I can create it using theatrical smoke generators. Dense white vapor that hugs the ground, follows the terrain, persists for the exact duration needed to cross the exposure zone. Petit shook his head. Theatrical smoke dissipates in wind. It is useless outdoors. Standard theatrical smoke, yes, but I can modify the chemistry, increase particle density, adjust humidity absorption, create fog that behaves like natural ground fog, dense enough to reduce visibility to under 50 meters, persistent enough to last 40 minutes, exactly the time needed for the train to cross the exposure zone. The room remained skeptical. One of the resistance engineers, a man named Dubois, who actually understood chemistry, asked the critical question, "What chemicals would you need?" Jasper pulled a notebook from his jacket. Mineral oil, glycerin, distilled water, ammonium chloride, and access to pressurized heating elements. I will need 4 days to build the generators, test the mixture, and position equipment along the route. 4 days, Petit said. We have 3. And even if you create this fog, what stops the wind from blowing it away in seconds? Jasper smiled for the first time. That is where the mirrors come in. Understanding Jasper Moreau's plan requires understanding his background, specifically how a stage magician became one of the most effective technical specialists in the French Resistance. Born August 3, 1902 in Marseille, Jasper grew up in the theater. His father managed a music hall. His mother performed as a dancer. Jasper absorbed theatrical craft from childhood, but his interest focused on stagecraft and illusion design rather than performance. By age 17, he was designing magic acts for traveling performers, disappearing cabinets, levitation rigs, mirror boxes that made people vanish. His specialty was large-scale illusions, effects that filled entire stages, that convinced audiences they were witnessing impossible phenomena. The secret, Jasper learned early, was controlling perception. You did not actually make things disappear. You made audiences believe they had disappeared by manipulating light, angles, and expectations. In 1924, he enrolled at the École Nationale Supérieure de Chimie in Paris, studying chemical engineering while continuing to design illusions freelance. His thesis examined aerosol dispersal patterns, specifically how to create and maintain artificial fog for theatrical productions. The work was practical rather than theoretical. Jasper needed fog that would fill a theater, remain stable under stage lighting, and clear rapidly for scene changes. He developed a fog formula using heated mineral oil mixed with glycerin and water vapor. The mixture produced dense white fog that was heavier than air, that flowed downward like liquid, that persisted much longer than standard theatrical smoke. Theater companies across France began using his fog generators. By 1930, Jasper had patents, manufacturing contracts, and a comfortable income designing special effects. When war came in 1939, Jasper was 37 years old, too old for military service. Classified as non-essential civilian, he continued designing theatrical effects through the early occupation years. But in 1942, the Germans began requisitioning theaters for troop entertainment, censoring performances, arresting performers suspected of resistance sympathies. Jasper joined the resistance not through ideology, but through craft. A resistance organizer needed forged identity documents. The forgeries required specific paper stock, particular inks, exact reproduction of official stamps. These were technical problems, exactly the kind Jasper had solved for decades, creating theatrical props that appeared authentic under scrutiny. He produced documents so perfect that German police accepted them without question. His reputation spread through resistance networks. The magician who can make anything look real. Need a false wall that passes structural inspection? Call Jasper. Need documents that survive chemical testing? Call Jasper. Need a bicycle to transform into a weapons cache? Call Jasper. By June 1943, he was working full-time for Colonel Petit's Lion network, solving technical problems that conventional resistance training never addressed. When Petit described the train problem, Jasper immediately recognized it as a scaled-up version of theatrical illusion. Make the train disappear by hiding it inside an effect. The 4 days Petit allowed became 3 days and 17 hours of frantic work. Jasper assembled his team, 2 chemistry students from the university, a metal worker who fabricated custom heating elements, and a farmer who provided access to a barn where they could conduct experiments away from German patrols. The fog formula required precise calibration. Too thin, and it would not provide adequate concealment. Too thick, and it would behave unnaturally, creating suspicious cloud formations that reconnaissance pilots would investigate. Jasper spent 14 hours adjusting ratios, testing dispersal patterns, measuring persistence duration under various humidity and temperature conditions. The breakthrough came when he added ammonium chloride to the mixture. The chemical increased fog density dramatically while also causing the vapor to absorb ambient moisture from the air. This made the artificial fog behave almost identically to natural ground fog, clinging to terrain, flowing into valleys, persisting even in moderate wind. Next came the generators. Jasper designed pressurized heating units that could vaporize the fog mixture rapidly, producing dense clouds continuously for up to 45 minutes. Each generator measured approximately 80 centimeters long, 30 centimeters in diameter, weighed 23 kilograms when fully loaded, and could be operated by one person using a hand-pumped pressure system. He built 16 generators in 2.5 days, fabricating them from salvaged agricultural equipment, plumbing supplies, and components scavenged from abandoned factories. The chemistry students mixed 340 liters of fog formula. The metal worker created specialized nozzles that dispersed the vapor in controlled patterns. Testing happened on the night of June 12th. Jasper and his team positioned 4 generators in a field outside Lyon, activated them simultaneously, and watched dense white fog pour across the ground. Within 6 minutes, they had created a fog bank covering approximately 2 hectares, reducing visibility to under 30 meters. The fog persisted for 38 minutes before dissipating. Dubois, the resistance engineer who had questioned the chemistry, stood in the middle of the artificial fog bank with an expression of genuine amazement. "I cannot see 20 meters in any direction," he said. "This is extraordinary." Jasper was already calculating. "We need 16 generators positioned every 200 meters along the exposed section of track. Activate them in sequence as the train passes. Create a continuous fog bank that moves with the train, concealing it from aerial observation throughout the exposure zone." "What about the mirrors you mentioned?" Dubois asked. Jasper smiled. "The fog hides the train. The mirrors hide the fog." The German reconnaissance pilots were not fools. They understood that weather conditions in southeastern France during June rarely produced natural fog, persisting past mid-morning. If reconnaissance flights observed dense ground fog at 1100 hours, they would become suspicious. They might investigate, descending to lower altitude, potentially spotting the train despite the fog concealment. Jasper's solution involved mirrors, specifically large angled reflectors positioned along the hillsides overlooking the railway line. The mirrors would catch sunlight and reflect it downward into the fog bank, creating diffuse glow that mimicked natural fog illuminated by overhead sun. From 3,000 meters altitude, reconnaissance pilots would see what appeared to be normal ground fog, glowing white in midday sun, completely consistent with natural atmospheric conditions. The mirrors also served a secondary purpose. By reflecting sunlight into the fog from multiple angles, they created internal illumination that reduced the fog's apparent density when viewed from above. This was critical. Dense ground fog viewed from altitude appears dark gray or even black because minimal light penetrates from above. Jasper's illuminated fog would appear bright white, exactly like natural fog with sun shining through it. He requisitioned mirrors from abandoned shops, farmhouses, and a theatrical warehouse that stored old stage equipment. The team collected 47 mirrors, ranging from small, handheld sizes to large wardrobe mirrors measuring nearly 2 meters tall. They mounted the mirrors on adjustable wooden frames, positioned them along the hillsides, and angled them precisely to reflect sunlight downward at calculated angles. On the morning of June 14th, everything was ready. 16 fog generators positioned along the rail line, 47 mirrors angled on surrounding hillsides. Jasper's team of 12 operators stationed with the generators, waiting for the signal to begin. And Train 67, loaded with 800 lives worth of supplies, sitting in the tunnel with steam pressure building, ready to make its run across the most dangerous 18 kilometers of occupied France. Colonel Petit arrived at the staging area at 0800 hours. He walked the line with Jasper, inspecting each generator position, checking sight lines, reviewing timing sequences. When they finished, Petit turned to face Jasper directly. If this fails, if the train is spotted and destroyed, 8 months of work is lost. More importantly, the cargo loss will cripple operations across the region. Men will die because we gambled on theatrical smoke. Jasper met his gaze steadily. If we do not move the train, those same men die because they lack supplies. The risk is identical. I am simply offering a way to reduce probability of detection. You are offering magic tricks against Luftwaffe reconnaissance. I am offering applied physics and chemistry against visual detection systems. The Luftwaffe pilots are looking for a train. I am making certain they see only fog. Petit was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Proceed. May whatever God protects magicians and fools watch over us today. The first Luftwaffe reconnaissance flight was scheduled to pass over the area at approximately 1000 hours. This gave Train 67 a narrow window. Depart the tunnel at 0930, cross the exposure zone before the reconnaissance flight arrived, reach the safety of the mountain tunnels on the far side by 10:45. Timing was critical and unforgiving. The train would travel at 40 kilometers per hour, the maximum safe speed for the route. At that speed, crossing 18 kilometers required approximately 27 minutes. Add time for acceleration out of the tunnel and deceleration approaching the far end, total exposure time would be approximately 35 minutes. Jasper had 40 minutes of fog duration, 5 minutes margin for error. At 09:15 hours, Jasper gave the order. Activate generators 1 through 4. Begin fog production. The 4 generators nearest the tunnel entrance roared to life. Pressurized fog mixture heated rapidly, vaporized, and poured from the nozzles in dense white streams. The vapor hit the ground and spread, flowing like water, filling the rail cut, spilling across adjacent fields. Within 3 minutes, the tunnel entrance was completely obscured. Visibility dropped to 20 meters. The fog hugged the ground exactly as Jasper had designed, creating a white blanket approximately 4 meters thick, dense enough to conceal a train but not so high that it appeared unnatural. At 0928 hours, Train 67's whistle sounded from inside the tunnel. The engineer, a man named Arnaud who had driven trains through these mountains for 18 years, had been briefed on the plan. He thought it was insane, but admitted he had no better options. Jasper stood at the tunnel mouth, watching fog swirl in the locomotive's wake as it emerged. The massive engine, a PLM Type 141R locomotive weighing 130 tons, rolled into the fog bank and disappeared. Only the sound betrayed its presence. The rhythmic chuff of steam pistons, the rumble of steel wheels on rails. "Activate generators 5 through 8, Jasper ordered. 4 more generators ignited. Fresh fog poured across the landscape, creating a continuous white barrier that followed the railroad cut. From Jasper's position on the hillside, the effect was startling. It looked exactly like natural ground fog filling a valley, dense white vapor flowing over terrain, completely concealing everything beneath. The train moved forward steadily. 42 freight cars rolling through the fog, invisible except to observers standing within 20 meters. Jasper's team followed in a truck, racing along a parallel farm road, monitoring the fog bank, ready to deploy backup generators if wind dispersed the concealment prematurely. At 0941 hours, generators 9 through 12 activated. The fog bank now stretched 6 kilometers along the rail line, a continuous white river flowing through the valleys. Sunlight filtering through the vapor created exactly the luminous effect Jasper had calculated. The mirrors positioned on hillsides caught direct sunlight and reflected it downward, illuminating the fog from within, making it glow bright white. Jasper scanned the sky constantly. No aircraft yet. The reconnaissance flight was not due for another 19 minutes, but German pilots sometimes varied their schedules. Early arrival would be catastrophic. The train maintained speed. Jasper listened to position reports crackling over portable radios. Train passing kilometer, marker 14. Fog holding. Visibility under 25 meters. Everything proceeding as planned. At 0953 hours, generators 13 through 16 activated. The fog bank now covered the entire exposure zone, 18 kilometers of concealment. Train 67 was 11 kilometers into its run, 16 more kilometers to go before reaching safety. Then Jasper heard it. Faint at first, then growing louder. Aircraft engine noise, high-pitched and distinct. A Foothills Storch observation plane approaching from the southeast. "Contact," Dubois reported over the radio. "Reconnaissance aircraft, 3,000 meters, heading northwest. He will pass directly over the exposure zone in approximately 4 minutes." Jasper grabbed his binoculars. Through the lenses, he spotted the aircraft. A small, high-wing monoplane, distinctive silhouette, unmistakable. The Storch was perfect for reconnaissance. Slow speed allowed pilots to observe ground details thoroughly. High altitude kept them safe from ground fire. The pilot would see the fog bank in approximately 3 minutes. Question was whether he would recognize it as natural weather or suspect artificial concealment. "All operators," Jasper transmitted, "maintain fog production at current levels. Do not increase output. We need the fog to appear completely natural." The train continued moving, now 14 kilometers into the crossing. It needed 13 more minutes to reach safety. The reconnaissance aircraft would overfly the fog bank in less than 3 minutes. Jasper felt the familiar sensation from theatrical performances, the moment when everything depended on audience perception, when technical preparation either succeeded or failed based on whether observers believed what they were seeing. At 0957 hours, the Foothills Storch reached the fog bank. Jasper watched through binoculars as the aircraft banked slightly, the pilot obviously observing the ground fog filling the valleys below. The aircraft did not descend. It did not circle for closer inspection. It continued on its patrol route, banking gently westward. Jasper allowed himself to breathe. The pilot had seen fog, natural ground fog, exactly what Jasper had designed. The mirror illumination worked. The fog density was correct. The dispersal pattern appeared completely natural from altitude, but the aircraft had not departed the area. It was circling back, making another pass. Dubois transmitted urgently. He is coming back around. Lower altitude this time, approximately 2,000 meters. He is investigating something. Jasper's mind raced through possibilities. What had the pilot noticed? Was the fog too uniform? Did the mirrors create unnatural reflections? Was there smoke from the locomotive visible above the fog layer? Then he understood. The wind had shifted. It was blowing from the west now, and natural ground fog in a west wind would drift eastward. But Jasper's fog generators were producing vapor continuously in fixed positions. The fog bank was not drifting. It was stationary. To a trained reconnaissance pilot, stationary ground fog in a steady wind was impossible. It was suspicious. All operators, Jasper transmitted, reduce fog production immediately. Let the existing bank drift naturally eastward. Stop generating new fog. The generators throttled down. No new vapor poured into the atmosphere. The existing fog bank, responding to the west wind, began drifting slowly eastward. The Foothills Storch completed its second pass. The pilot banked westward again and continued his patrol route without further investigation. Jasper watched until the aircraft disappeared into the distance. Then he slumped against the truck, hands shaking slightly. "That was closer than I would prefer," he muttered. "Train position," he transmitted. 16 kilometers, came the reply. Approaching the far side tunnel in approximately 8 minutes. Jasper checked his watch. 09:59 hours. They had done it. Train 67 would reach safety before the next reconnaissance flight. The cargo would arrive intact, but there was a problem. With fog production stopped, the concealment was dissipating. The train was still partially exposed for another 8 minutes. If another aircraft appeared, if German patrols on the ground spotted the thinning fog and investigated, everything could still fail. "Resume fog production at 50%, Jasper ordered. Generators 12 through 16 only. Create enough concealment for the final approach but allow natural drift." 4 generators roared back to life, producing fog at reduced intensity. The white vapor flowed eastward naturally now, appearing exactly like dissipating ground fog burning off in morning sun. At 10:07 hours, the radio crackled. "Train 67 is in the tunnel. Repeat, train is secure. Mission complete." Jasper closed his eyes and allowed himself a moment of relief. 800 lives worth of supplies delivered. Anti-aircraft guns that would protect resistance operations. Ammunition that would sustain fighters through critical operations. Medical supplies that would save lives. All of it saved by theatrical smoke, mirrors, and an understanding of how perception shapes reality. The shutdown process took another 20 minutes. Jasper's team deactivated the generators, dismantled the equipment, removed the mirrors from the hillsides, and erased all evidence of the operation. By 10:30 hours, the rail line appeared completely normal, just empty track cutting through farmland, no indication that anything unusual had occurred. Jasper and his team returned to Lyon exhausted, exhilarated, and already thinking about the next problem. Colonel Petit met them at the safe house, his expression revealing nothing. Then he extended his hand. "Your magic trick worked, magician. The train is secure. The cargo is being unloaded." Jasper shook his hand. "Physics and chemistry, Colonel, not magic." Petit smiled slightly. "Perhaps. But I watched you create fog from nothing, hide a train in plain sight, and make German pilots see exactly what you wanted them to see. If that is not magic, it is close enough." Over the following months, Jasper's fog screen technique was used 7 more times to conceal resistance movements across southern France. Trains, truck convoys, even troop movements, were hidden using variations of the system. The Germans never determined what was happening. Intelligence reports noted unusual fog conditions but attributed them to local weather patterns. The technique's success lay in its fundamental principle. You could not fight superior German aerial reconnaissance with conventional camouflage or concealment, but you could exploit the reconnaissance system's reliance on visual detection. Make observers see something completely normal, something their training taught them to ignore, and they would miss what was hidden in plain sight. Jasper Moreau survived the war. He returned to theatrical work afterward, designing illusions for Paris music halls, teaching stagecraft at the Conservatoire, and occasionally consulting with French intelligence services on technical deception operations. He never spoke publicly about his resistance work, deflecting questions with a magician's characteristic misdirection. But in 1968, when a young historian researching resistance operations discovered documents describing the fog screen operation, Jasper finally agreed to an interview. The historian asked the obvious question, "How did you know it would work?" Jasper thought for a long moment before answering. "I did not know. Not with certainty, but I understood that people see what they expect to see. German pilots expected ground fog in valleys. They expected trains to be visible dark shapes against light terrain. I gave them the fog they expected and hid the train inside it. The rest was simply technical execution. And the mirrors? The mirrors were necessary because natural fog glows when sunlit. Artificial fog without internal illumination would appear too dark, too dense, unnatural. The mirrors provided that illumination. They made the impossible appear completely ordinary." The historian asked one final question. "What would you say to people who dismiss theatrical techniques as trivial compared to conventional military operations?" Jasper smiled. The same smile he had worn that morning in June 1943, when explaining his plan to skeptical resistance commanders. "I would tell them that wars are won not just with weapons, but with perception. Make your enemies see what you want them to see, believe what you want them to believe, and you control the battlefield more effectively than any tank or aircraft. That is not trivial. That is the essence of strategy." The fog generators Jasper designed were never mass-produced, never adopted as standard military equipment. They remained improvisational tools, custom-built for specific operations, effective precisely because they were unexpected. But the principle behind them, using perception and deception to defeat superior enemy capabilities, became foundational to modern military deception operations. Train 67's cargo reached the Maquis stronghold in the Vercors Mountains on June 15, 1943. The anti-aircraft guns were deployed 2 weeks later, shooting down 4 German aircraft during subsequent operations. The ammunition sustained resistance fighters through summer and fall operations that tied down 3 German divisions that might otherwise have reinforced defenses elsewhere. The medical supplies saved countless lives, and somewhere in the archives of Luftwaffe reconnaissance reports, filed and forgotten, is a notation from June 14, 1943. Dense ground fog observed in Vercors Foothills, unusual persistence for midday conditions, possibly indicates local weather anomaly. Recommend continued monitoring. The German pilot who wrote that report never learned that the fog was not natural, that a train had passed beneath him, invisible and safe, that a stage magician had turned atmospheric physics into a weapon more effective than any explosive. He saw exactly what Jasper Moreau wanted him to see. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious, nothing worth investigating. Sometimes the most devastating victories are the ones the enemy never realizes they lost.